Hi, OpenXML developers. This is Eric White. In this screencast, I'm going to introduce a pretty cool little tool that enables you to explore word markup from within Word 2013. For another project, I had to research a little bit about the new application model in Office 2013. And after looking at the application model a little bit, I realized it was possible to write this little application that enables you to look at and play around with word markup right from within Word itself. This is a JavaScript application. This is also a result of a fair amount of the JavaScript work that I've been doing over the last number of months. I'll explain the JavaScript code when we get to that point in time. The easiest way to discuss this little application, first of all, is just to show it to you. So let's go take a look at it. Here I am in Visual Studio 2012. I have the application open, and in order to run this little Word 2013 application, I just press F5, and Word 2013 starts. Well, the simplest way to look at this is put a little bit of text in there and then tell it I want to get that markup. And here we can see the OpenXML word processing ML markup for what we just put in there. All right, now let's do something else. Let's style that text. Let's make it heading 1 and then get the markup. And there we can see the paragraph properties that indicate that this is styled with heading 1. I'll make a word in there. I'll make it strong. I'll apply the strong character style to it. And now I'll select the entire paragraph again, and I will get the markup for the entire paragraph. And I'm going to make this window a little bit wider so we can see the markup easier. And now we can see the paragraph properties up here that indicate that it's heading 1. We can see the run here that is styled with the character style of strong. And we can see our other runs that are in this particular sentence. We can do something here is we can actually change this markup. I can make it say this is an interesting test. And I'll click Set Markup, and it then makes the appropriate change to the Word document. It wants this to be an interesting test. So let's set that markup again, and there we can see it's fixed the text in the document. We can do all kinds of interesting things with this. Here I'll put in text that is a hyperlink. Get the markup, and there we can see the markup for a hyperlink. I'll put the entire paragraph in a content control, and then I'll put a nested content control in that paragraph. Let's change a couple of properties here. I'll tell it this is nested. And instead of showing it as a bounding box, I'll tell it to show it as a start-end tag and click OK. And I'll go set the properties for this outer content control. I'll call it outer. Again, I want to show it as a start-end tag and click OK. And we can get that markup. And here we can see our nested content controls. Up here, this is the outer content control, and then we see the SDT content, and within there we also see the inner SDT, or structured data type, and that contains the inner content, this particular run here that has content. We can see a Word 15 element, this appearance element that tells us that this content control should have the appearance of tags as opposed to a block. We can see the alias and tag elements for both the inner and nested content controls. One of the things that is interesting about this capability of interacting with the document using OpenXML from within the Word 2013 app is it gives us the capabilities for constructing really elaborate documents from within that app. And we can construct these documents without using the Word-specific APIs. Previously, when you would be building an application that would construct a document using Word directly, you would be using the Word object model. You'd be inserting paragraphs and so on. It's a little bit idiosyncratic. In contrast, simply fabricating some OpenXML markup and inserting that OpenXML markup in the document, this is a very predictable and straightforward programming task. So you could build an application that puts together all kinds of interesting content. Let's insert a table here. I'm going to insert a table with 3 columns and 2 rows. And this might be an interesting table that we want to insert multiple copies of into this document. So I can select the table, I can get the markup, and here we can see the markup for that table. Now I can change the selection to be down here below the table and set the markup. And there I have cloned the table that I inserted previously. Well, this is a pretty artificial example, but you can see how you could fabricate markup to contain just about anything that you want to contain and write an application to generate that markup and put it right into the document based on interactions over here in this task pane. It's a pretty powerful combination of features. I want to show you how this little application behaves if you do something wrong with setting your markup. So here I'll get the markup and we see what we expected to see. And now I'm going to delete that angle bracket. So this becomes invalid XML. And if I tell it to set the markup, then this little application comes up and tells us that we have a parsing error, a syntax error. This is the error reported by the XML parser. I can put it back and then set markup and we can see that the error goes away. Now I'm going to make a change that makes this invalid word processing ML. It's valid XML, but it's invalid word processing ML. And if I tell it to set the markup, then Word reports an error. The message it gives us is data write error, cannot write to the current selection. All this little application does is it just passes on the errors that are generated by the XML parser and that are generated by Word. That's all there is to this little application. Now let's go build it. Building these little HTML5/JavaScript/CSS applications for Office 2013, it's really an awful lot of fun. I'm pretty bullish on this programming API. I think that this API finally puts to rest all of the legacy APIs and all of their associated baggage, such as the ability to create macros that contain a virus. And it also gets rid of the difficulties of installing a VSTO application. You'll see that these types of applications are really easy to find and install in the Office App Store. I will be putting this little application in the Office App Store, and what this means is that wherever you have Word 2013 installed, you can go and get this application with an absolute minimum of effort and use it to explore markup. It's interesting and useful in its own right. So it needs to be available to people in as easy a fashion as possible. So it will be in the application store pretty soon. Okay, let's go build this application. Before you can build an app for Office using Visual Studio 2012, you need to download and install the tools for Visual Studio 2012 that enable you to do this. To download the tools, you need to visit this downloads page on MSDN. You can find this page at this location. And you can find the tools right down here. When you click download the tools, it will download an exe that you then run, and then it uses the web platform installer to install all the necessary pieces onto your installation of Visual Studio 2012. One quick note, you need to have either Ultimate, Premium, or Professional editions of Visual Studio 2012 to build the tools as I'm going to show you in this screencast. Once you have downloaded and installed the tools, you'll need to create a new Visual Studio 2012 project. Click File, New Project. And what we want is, under Visual C#, under Office SharePoint, click Apps, and we want this app for Office 2013. Browse to the folder where you want to put the application, and I call this application Word Markup Explorer. We don't need to create a directory for this solution. We're going to create this application in a task pane, and we can only create an application of this variety for Word. Neither Excel nor PowerPoint have the capabilities of getting and injecting OpenXML markup directly into the document in the same fashion that Word does. Click Finish. We've now put together our project. This little application uses some modules, some JavaScript modules that I've been developing over the last few months. The module that is important to us is the link to XML for JavaScript module, and that has a dependency on the very excellent link.js module. Those modules are in the zip file that is attached to the blog post that accompanies this video. If you don't have the link back to the blog post, you can get the link down below in the description of this video on YouTube. Here are those two modules, link.js and LTXML.js. I'm going to copy those to the clipboard, and I'm going to paste them in the scripts directory of Word Markup Explorer Web project. Now I'm going to go over here and I'm going to tell it I want to add existing items. I'll go to the scripts directory, and here are the two modules of interest. Let's add those to our project. Now we have to include the script tags that bring those modules into our Word project. I'll paste in the two script tags. These are ordinary script elements that tell us that we want to import link.js and LTXML.js. We need to import those two modules before we have the script tag for Word Markup Explorer.js, because we'll be using those in Word Markup Explorer.js. And before we're done with this Word Markup Explorer.html, we're going to paste in the little bits of HTML that describe our little teeny user interface. We can see our couple of buttons there to get the markup and set the markup. Here is the div that contains error messages if error messages are there. And finally, there's the text area down below that is in a div with the ID of markup. We're done with modifications to this file. All of this code is included in listings with the blog post that introduces this video, so it makes it easy for you to build this little application yourself. You certainly can just download the project and run it. However, it's really interesting to take a look at these JavaScript applications for Office 2013. It's an interesting process just to go build the application yourself. And now I'm going to replace the entire contents of Word Markup Explorer.js with the source code for this little application. I'll walk through this code a bit. Up here in this initialize method, it uses a little bit of jQuery markup to set up the bindings to the click methods for our buttons. Dropping down here, this JavaScript code is using the module pattern so that all of these variables that I declare in this module, they're hidden. They're actually just local variables to this anonymous function. This is the typical module pattern that you see used in JavaScript. There are some variables put together so that we have all of our various namespaces as appropriate. Down here, I've put in a bit of code to pre-atomize the X names for the RSID elements and attributes. The code strips out those RSID elements and attributes before it shows them to you in the Word Markup Explorer. They're not really of interest to you, and it just clutters up the markup to have those there. And as you could see, it was pretty clean and easy to go and play around with that markup. We really didn't want to have these RSID elements and attributes cluttering up our life for us. Down here, this is a recursive pure functional transform, this simplified transform method that gets rid of all of the RSID elements and attributes. And below that, there's this simplify markup method that calls the simplify markup transform, and then below that it does a bunch of other stuff just to make the markup as clean and as neat as possible so that it's easy for you to work with. It uses regex replace functionality to clean up some stuff in the markup. Down here is the get markup method. This is the method that gets called when the get markup button is clicked. You can see it calls the simplify markup method, and after it calls the simplify markup method, it sets the text area control with the string that it got from that simplify markup method. This T variable contains the text area. One thing that I did in this code is that before letting you go and play around with all of that markup and before displaying the markup, the code strips out all of the declarations of the namespaces. We know what all those namespaces are. We just don't need to have all of that massive amount of text to define those namespaces in our little Markup Explorer. So the code gets rid of those before it lets you play around with them, and then it puts them back in before it restores that markup or sets that markup in the Word document. And here is the set markup function. You can explore through this code as you like. It's pretty straightforward. This is the last method in this module. One aspect of this code is that after it gets the markup, and then you change the markup, and then you set the markup, it sets the markup, and then it again gets the markup. This means that you are free to change the markup in a way that is valid OpenXML, but might not be the way that Word prefers to have that markup. So after you set the markup, it gives you back the markup that Word actually stores in the document. We've made all of our changes necessary to run this application. It was pretty simple, as you could see. So let's press F5 and run our application. Let me show the feature where this little application gets the markup after it sets the markup. So I'll put in, this is a test. I'll select is, and I'm going to bold it. Now I'll select the entire sentence and get the markup. Here we can see the markup for that paragraph, and we can see the run there in the middle that has the B element for the bolded text. One thing that I can do in here is I can put in w:\val equals 0. This is another valid approach to writing the markup that tells Word to not bold that text. And now if I set the markup, we see that Word gives us back the markup without the bolded text. It doesn't just leave us with the markup with the w:\val equals 0. In a similar way, if I put in w:\val equals 1 and I set the markup, then the application goes and gets the markup back from Word and sets the markup to show just the W:(B) element in there with the default value of the val attribute set to 1. This is the normal way that Word writes that markup. So there it is. That's pretty cool if you ask me. I think it's a pretty interesting way to explore OpenXML markup and to make little changes to the markup and see how the changes that you make show up in Word. It also demonstrates the basic core functionality of working with OpenXML markup in these new JavaScript apps for Office. Working with OpenXML is one of the interesting ways where you can gain a whole bunch of power in writing these apps for Office. Come back often to openxmldeveloper.org and take a look at the new content that we are constantly producing. You can find me on my blog at ericwhite.com. You can follow me on Twitter at ericwhitedev. And you can follow OpenXML on Twitter at OpenXMLDev. Thanks for watching.